from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which is the home to Humanities Without Walls, a 16-partner consortium of universities from Penn State in the east to the University of Nebraska in the west and beyond. For now, unless you're a panelist or a speaker, we ask that you please set your views to speaker view and turn off your video mode. These settings will make for a visually clearer presentation. Thank you. My name is Antoinette Burton. I'm a feminist historian of the British Empire by training. I'm the director of the Humanities Research Institute here at Illinois and the faculty lead for Humanities Without Walls, which is entering its 6th year as a leader in national and international conversations about the work of the humanities, both in and outside the academy, in this changing world. I'm joined today by Jason Mierek, Director of Operations, Maggie Nettesheim-Hoffman, Associate Director for Career Diversity, and Peggy Brennan, Research Associate for HWW this semester, as well as our distinguished guest panelists. Because I'm speaking from East Central Illinois and from the University of Illinois, I want to note that the Humanities Research Institute respectfully acknowledges that we are on the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. These nations were forcefully removed from their traditional territories, and these lands continue to carry the stories of these nations and their struggles for survival and identity. As humanists, we recognize that the past is not past, and that no field or arena of inquiry is exempt from the responsibility of addressing the legacies of settler colonialism and its contemporary manifestations well beyond acknowledgments such as this. So this acknowledgement is a demonstration of our ongoing commitment to supporting the work of Indigenous scholars and communities so that we're together able to vision what poet Joy Harjo calls a map to the next world. And if you'd like to hear more about how we support Indigenous scholars and scholarship, please let me know. I'd be happy to talk with you about it. Meanwhile, thank you all for joining us for this Humanities Without Walls panel and information session. As you probably know, Humanities Without Walls is funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, which supports the work of so many humanities faculty and students, and which has enabled us to think about new ways of flourishing and reimagining what the impact of humanities and arts-based thinking and practice can and should be. While Mellon has always been focused on social change and the public good, new president, Elizabeth Alexander, has led the foundation more expressly toward a full-on commitment to social justice and racial equity by design. At HWW, we take these questions seriously, and in our career diversity efforts, we are continually striving to think about how to structure our approaches with these issues top of mind. As our name suggests, the humanities should be without walls. That is to say, welcoming to all, alive to the porous boundaries between the academy and the world, and committed to helping humanists determine how best to move their work and the institutions they inhabit toward that boundless horizon. Our HWW Career Diversity Workshops, which we run in Chicago for 5 consecutive summers, have been designed to do just that, to equip PhD students in the humanities and arts to think about their graduate training as a launching pad for a variety of professional pathways, from the academy to nonprofits, to government work, to education and the public arts. We've graduated 150 alums who form a network of connections and expertise across the globe, 3 of whom are here today to share their experiences on the panel and to tell us how what they learned at the HWW workshop has helped them to get to where they are now. Our summer workshops have been run as hands-on experiences, bringing leaders from a variety of employment sectors to talk about their own career pathways with a cohort of doctoral students in the humanities and related fields. We've hosted speakers who have helped students to craft resumes and manage their social media presence, to think about how to conduct informational interviews with people whose jobs align with their interests, and to develop skills and habits of mind that will equip them for academic employment or for careers beyond the academy. In the summer of 2021, we're hosting our 6th Career Diversity Workshop, which will be virtual, and there will be information about that at the end of today's session. Again, if you've come in just now, please set your views to speaker and turn off video mode. To lead us into our panel presentations and discussion is Maggie Nettesheim Hoffman, currently a PhD student at Marquette University, one of our consortial partners, a Humanities Without Walls 2017 alum, the coordinator of the summer workshop in 2019, and now the associate director of our career diversity efforts. Maggie is the embodiment of HWW values and habits of mind, and it gives me great pleasure to turn things over to her now.
Thank you, Antoinette, and welcome to all our attendees for what is HWW's first virtual event. As Antoinette mentioned, I am the Associate Director of Career Diversity for Humanities Without Walls, helping to guide our career diversity programming for universities within and beyond the consortium. At last check, we have approximately 275 attendees viewing today's workshop, participating from nearly 40 universities across the United States and Europe. We thank you for joining us, for your active listening and engagement with our alums, and for supporting the work of the HWW Consortium. It is my privilege to introduce you to the 3 distinguished HWW Fellowship Alums participating with us during today's panel. We believe their career stories and development post-workshop offer key insights into some of the experiences graduate students who earn PhDs in the humanities will face post-graduation. We believe their stories offer all of us a chance to reflect on our own journeys, including thinking through our values, career ethics, and engaging in work which we each find meaningful or energizing. Above all, the HWW workshop experience provided hope to me when I was a fellow in 2017. Hope that I might be able to take some agency in the construction of my career, that I wasn't a failure if I decided not to pursue a tenure track job or failed to secure one, and that ultimately empowered me to take the skills, tools, and strategies I learned back home to my city and my university. I hope that our panelists today inspire you to begin this process, to consider applying for the HWW Fellowship, and to reflect upon the broad application of your training and research expertise in the world. Each panelist will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, sharing their stories, strategies, and post-workshop experiences. We will then have a chance to directly engage in a Q&A with the panelists with questions drawn from you, submitted to our team through the chat function. They are working on collating and collecting all of your questions and will be sharing those with me as we moderate the Q&A. If you have any additional questions that we can't address during the panel, please feel free to email our HWW Director of Operations, Jason Myrick, at hww-directorops@illinois.edu. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist. Ira S. Murfin is a theater and performance scholar and artist working in cultural programming and public engagement in Chicago. He is currently the program manager for neighborhood partnerships and a Mellon ACLS Public Fellow at the Chicago Humanities Festival. He was a member of the inaugural HWW Summer Workshop cohort in 2015. He holds the interdisciplinary PhD in theater and drama from Northwestern University and an MFA in writing from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. His performance work has been seen in many venues in Chicago and beyond, including the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, Lynx Hall, and the Rhinoceros Theater Festival. He has published in both academic and non-specialist contexts and regularly lectures and leads public conversations for Chicago performing arts institutions, including 8 seasons as a preamble scholar with Chicago Shakespeare Theater. Prior to joining CHF in the fall of 2019, he was the Assistant Director for Programming with the Guild Literary Complex. Please help me welcome Ira Murfin.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much to everybody for being here, taking time to express your curiosity about HWW and about our paths, that were sparked by that program. And thanks to everybody from HWW for inviting us, for inviting me and my co-panelists to speak. So I'll start just quickly talking a little bit about my experience with the Humanities Without Walls Summer Workshop, and then maybe widen a little bit to talk about my career path since. So As Maggie said, I was part of the first cohort, so it was really a new thing to me, and a new thing, I think, in you know, the national context, at least for the humanities period. So, you know, I'd say that for me, the summer workshop was first and foremost very affirmative. I think I had been sort of circling this notion that there was something that I wanted to do that wasn't exactly the path that was laid out by the tenure track, and I had a lot of notions about what that might be, but I was really just starting to put language to this kind of this, you know, concept of alt-ac, or this you know, pathway. So so really just like helped form that concept for me, and that, you know, was something that I could hold and talk about, and kind of start to shape a career path forward towards. And then I think it also brought a community of other people who were doing the same thing. And even though the people I was in the workshop with may have come from very different backgrounds and had very different career paths ahead of them, all of them had this kind of foot in another place, a foot in practice, or a foot in the public-facing world, or advocacy, or activism, or creative practice, or something like that made them want to think about how to combine these two things together. And you know, and in some ways, you know, it provided this kind of legitimization for these impulses for me. Then secondly, I think it's just a very informative experience, right? It introduced kind of what some avenues into other fields people have taken were. It definitely introduced me to many fields and spheres that I hadn't even thought of, many of which were not of interest to me professionally, but certainly were really fascinating to see the kind of broad range of careers that people with PhDs or people who spent time in PhD programs have gone into, and the ways in which people might imagine that could happen for somebody coming from that background. And, you know, and included in that was, I learned during the HWW workshop about the Mellon ACLS Public Fellowship Program, which is sort of, you know, I think of as on a continuum in some ways with the HWW program, and ended up being, you know, where I am today. So certainly that, you know, it sparked that connection and put that in my mind as well. And perhaps this is unique to me, but it so happened in the earlier times of HWW workshop, there was a partnership with the Chicago Humanities Festival to do the summer programming around the workshop. So it so happens that I work for the organization that was running the programming when I did the workshop. That is probably not a guarantee for everybody, but that's a particular path that happened for me. But and I think this is the important part I want to get to, is that I also found it very frustrating, and I found it frustrating in a kind of galvanizing way, because I think in 2015 at least, and I don't know that it's that different now, although I think it's somewhat different, a lot about what I found us hearing from people who came to speak, from people we talked about, were kind of obstacles, were ways that things that we coming from academia thought of as assets, as accomplishments, were liabilities, right? You know, we heard a lot of people speak who had sort of abandoned academic paths to go into another sector, who sort of, you know, once they had made that decision, didn't see a utility to completing the PhD. You know, and so the sense of the PhD being something that's kind of not compatible with working in industry or in a public-facing field kept coming up, even from people who were presenting, trying to, you know, give tools, give advice, you know, sort of support this idea. And I think, you know, well, whereas at the time, I think that was difficult to hear. I think it was really important to hear and understand those attitudes, And I think it was galvanizing for a lot of us in that year to think about not only our own career paths, but to think about what needs to change, what new consciousness needs to be present, both inside the university about how to prepare people, and I think there is a lot of evidence that that's happening, but also outside the university, I think, in the organizations, companies, industries, governmental units, et cetera, that benefit from people with doctoral training going into those fields, thinking about ways to articulate the value of the PhD in those spheres, which is one of the things that I think the Mellon ACLS fellowship that I have right now is designed to do as well. So just to give a sense before I'm through, I don't know how much of my time I've used, but probably most of it. But just to give a sense of sort of what my trajectory has been, because I come from a arts practice background, a creative background, kind of went into the PhD without a totally clear sense that of what this career path meant for most people, right? I think I went in sort of to explore a certain topic. I wanted to write a certain dissertation. I wanted to think through certain things about the creative field that I've been working in for a long time. And sort of I got to Northwestern where I did my PhD and realized, oh, everybody else is here to sort of get one job. They have all these other research interests, but and that's sort of when I started to think about what does the PhD really mean for me? And I did get this opportunity really early on to start lecturing, as my bio mentioned, at Chicago Shakespeare Theater, which was just this chance to talk to audiences. The lectures happen before a performance, so it's talking to audiences right before they go see a play. And so it's this chance to give a kind of half-hour scholarly lecture that offers some of the things that any academic work, any classroom teaching would do, right? Some tools to analyze, think about, historicize what audiences are about to see, but doing that in the context of audiences that had voluntarily come to the theater and who were about to see this play for entertainment for the first time, and giving them tools to sort of make of that something that might be much more thought-provoking, much more politically complex, much more historically informative than it otherwise would be, was a really empowering experience, and a really unique experience, I think, that I got to have. And that really set me on this path of thinking of how do I professionalize towards doing this kind of work. And certainly the HWW workshop was part of that. I was then able to do a assistantship in the Humanities Institute at Northwestern, where I was able to do public humanities programming. I was part of a public humanities colloquium that was started by grad students at Northwestern to sort of think through some of these issues. I continued to do more kind of public speaking, publishing in not only academic journals, but in the magazine of the Museum of Contemporary Art, to writing about performance in ways that connected to audiences more broadly. But a lot of that sort of happened sort of under the umbrella of academia. And I found that when I finished my PhD, the job market was really difficult, and it was the warnings that I got in the HWW workshop really were there, right? There was a lot of crickets on the job market, and I did end up getting a position with the Guild Literary Complex. It's a great organization here in Chicago that was really valuable, but not sustainable in terms of the funding of that organization. And so really the Mellon ACLS fellowship that I have now, and I'd be happy to talk more about that in Q&A, I think is proved to be kind of a golden ticket for me. It proved to be a great way to kind of enter into this career path and move in this direction. But even that, I think, was built on this experience with this other organization that I worked for a year and a half before that. And so still sort of relies on some other elements outside of academia as well. So I'd really just you know, I'm glad that we're having this conversation. We keep having these conversations, and that I hope we can keep advocating for this kind of mutual university and public sector support for the kind of public-facing work that the HWW program supports and prepares people for. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ira. And again, if you have any questions for our speakers, or something, you know, if they have a comment or a particular part of their story that inspires you to ask a question, please put those in the chat so that we can collate them for our Q&A session. So our second speaker today is Linda Garcia Merchant. She is the U.S. Latino Digital Humanities Postdoctoral Fellow at Arte Publico Press at the University of Houston. Garcia Merchant is also the co-founder of the Chicana por Mi Raza Digital Memory Collection, an online repository of Chicana, Latina, second wave feminist materials and interviews. With over 10,000 assets and 150 filmed interviews, CPMR is considered one of the largest collections of its kind. Her interview with the editors of Chicana Movidas, New Narratives of Activism and Feminism in the Movement Era, Making Chicana Movidas, is featured in the Aztlán, a Journal of Chicano Studies, Spring 2020 special issue on Chicana feminism. Garcia Merchant's research site, Chicana Diasporic, a nomadic journey of the activist exiled, highlights the political, ideological journey of the women of the Chicana Caucus of the National Women's Political Caucus from 1973 to 1979, alongside the autobiographical experience of living as Mexican and Black during that same period. Acutely aware of the complexities that continue to present themselves through this identity, Garcia Merchant identifies as bicultural and Chicana. Please help me welcome Linda.
Hello, everyone. I just, thank you so much for doing such a good job at pronouncing everything in that bio, because it's, it's a mouthful, all the things that I do. So thank you very much to everyone that put this together, Jason and Maggie and Antoinette and everybody that's done this. When you asked me about this, I thought, okay, so what do I have to continue to contribute to this? And I thought, no, you're doing some really interesting work that that is the outcome of your time as in the 2016 cohort. And so so I think I really want to start with just a couple of, just a sort of a self-promotional, not necessarily self-promotional, but certainly the work that we're doing at Arte Publico. I want to talk a little bit about the recovering the U.S. Hispanic literary heritage. There's a few things under the umbrella of the U.S. Latino Digital Humanities program at the University of Houston. It is the outshoot of the Arte Publico's recovery project that started when Arte Publico started in 1979. A lot of people don't realize that Arte Publico is one of the oldest Latino presses in the country, starting in 1979. A lot of people also don't realize that one of their first significant publications was House on Mango Street. People don't associate that title with Arte Publico Press, but that is who actually published it in 1983. And so, and that is really reflective of the amazing and wonderful work that nobody, the people aren't aware of, that is the kind of scholarship that comes out of Latino scholarship and Latino literature and the Latino experience in the United States. And so that was one of the things I want to talk about. So it's really wonderful to get this opportunity to work at Arte Publico as this fellow. It's a 2-year Mellon-funded fellowship. And so, so the other thing I want to talk about is there is a call coming up in September for the Grants and Aid Project, which is, this year we have 7 Grants and Aids project where we help projects, literary projects, and you can actually read the grant. I've included the links in the chat. That on Latino literary projects that are really about recovering authors' work, periods of time from, I want to say it's the turn of the last century to 1980, because that is the goal of the Hispanic Recovery Project, is to do that kind of work. And so the money is, the money can be applied towards a variety of things. So it's not it's not so tailored that that's specific to one, absolute element of something. It really is about moving projects forward that may have gotten an initial grant to be produced or to be envisioned or to be conceptualized, but haven't gone any further. So I strongly encourage the grant, the call, the CFP is coming out the first week of September. Look at it. I mean, it's I think the max is $7,500, but it's definitely worth it because it really can move projects forward in a way that if they've already been envisioned in some kind of a way, can move them forward to create, other levels of sustainability. All right, so that's what I'm going to say about that. So the long and short of the recovery is that we are an organization that recovers Hispanic culture in the United States, specifically literary culture. We are the outcome of a press, and so it is specific to Latino literary culture. And the U.S. Latino Digital Humanities Program is the sort of the Arte Publico begets the Recovery Project, begets USLDH. And it's the newest part of this. So when I got this fellowship, one of the reasons I was chosen was because I have been doing work with a longstanding recovery project, Chicana Pomirasa, that I am someone who has actually cultivated some level of recognition in the field prior to going to grad school and then continuing along that line while in graduate school, which brings me to Humanities Without Walls. So one of the things I want to say about Humanities Without Walls is I was in the 2016, so the second cohort, and I am from Chicago. And so I think I wasn't quite sure what I was more excited about was, getting to be a part of this amazing group of scholars from the Midwest, because then it was still a Big Ten call. But to also get to meet Allison Cuddy. I'm from Chicago, and I was a huge fan, because she'd been on. It was like I was a total fan gush when I got to meet her, and and of course, like all really amazing people, she's a lovely human being and quite accessible, and it really was the start of 3 weeks of understanding a Chicago I knew nothing about, that I had never experienced. And I say that to say that one of the great things about HWW is you get to be around institutions and organizations and people that you wouldn't necessarily have access to. And that was a real introduction to a city that I thought I knew really, really well. I come out of activism. I come out of working in the public sector, the not-for-profit sector. I mean, I had a pretty significant career going into graduate school, and yet I learned more about my own city and about the value of the work and the discipline that I was cultivating in graduate school. I'm from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, is really good at professional development. We do mock job talks, we do interviewing, at sessions, we have to do a professional development class. There's always things that cultivate this, right? We're very collaborative. And so, which is fine if you're following the traditional course in the academy. I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to do that. I know I wanted to finish, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. But I also understood going into graduate school that all of the branding that I had understood about my own work as a filmmaker, working with Chicana Pomirasa, and working in, as a consultant in the private sector, I understood that what I was learning at UNL was beneficial to my discipline and would be beneficial to me staying in the academy and even beneficial outside of it, because there is a certain amount of cachet that comes with this PhD, whether we realize it or not. And it's up to us to understand how to leverage that. And it isn't just a self-confidence, it's also an understanding of how to posit oneself. And I think that's what Humanities Without Walls does best. It gives us opportunities for these informative interviews to have that opportunity to have conversation with someone we wouldn't necessarily be accessible to have conversations, or to learn who the people are within institutions that we are interested in. And so that was, I think, the biggest outcome I got out of Humanities Without Walls, was understanding my value outside the academy, how to situate that value I was developing within my discipline in the academy, outside the academy, in the private sector. And then the fact that I was able to develop relationships with this group of people for 3 weeks, I still celebrate babies and marriages and job opportunities that my cohort gets. When I defended my dis, I got messages from most of my cohort, telling me congratulations, because that's what we do. And that's how we continue to operate, 4 years later. And where do you get those kinds of opportunities in the world? Certainly, in a summer institute or any of that. I mean, you get an opportunity to learn something, but the takeaway is that's literally, it's sort of a finite moment. Humanities Without Walls has continued to be a part of my life, with this relationship that I continue to have with my cohort. So I think that was pretty much all I wanted to say about it. But thank you again. And I look forward to any questions about any of that stuff.
Great. Thanks so much, Linda. I just want to say, and I put this in the chat too, that the community that's built is I think one of the most beautiful things that comes out of the workshop experience. So for those of you considering applying, I think that's one of the strengths of our program. Okay, now I think I'm pleased to introduce to everyone Kay Hotoda. She was a Humanities Without Walls pre-doctoral fellow in the inaugural cohort of 2015. She earned her BA in philosophy from the University of Chicago in 2006 and her PhD in philosophy from the University of Illinois at Chicago in 2018. Her dissertation explored the intersection of trauma studies and personal identity. She is currently both the graduate program coordinator and business manager for the Department of Philosophy at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where she provides academic and financial support for their faculty and graduate students. Please, Kay, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for, thank you to the organizers for having me back. This is my second alum panel. I don't know, I could just go on forever about Humanities Without Walls. And thanks to the participants for joining us to hear us talk about our experiences. So yeah, I could go on for a long time about the impact of this workshop on me, my career, my research. I wanted to talk about two specific things that the workshop, the way that it had an impact on me, what I learned from it, and then kind of close with some remarks about maybe thinking about the workshop in light of the pandemic. I'll start with a sort of broad sort of impact that that the workshop had on me. So in 2015, I was still 3 years away from finishing and defending my dissertation. And it was a really like dark and difficult time for me. There's a lot going on. So I mainly was just struggling with writing the dissertation. And part of it was that I was working in a sort of interdisciplinary or kind of work that wasn't yet, that a lot of people were working on in trauma studies and philosophy. Now there are more people, but working on it. But so I felt sort of isolated, and then there was also this sense of like, well, why am I writing this thing if the job market is supposed to be so abysmal? And you know, it's the way that sometimes some people put it is you have to take all these temporary positions all over the place, and then maybe you'll get a tenure track position. I don't know, it was just sort of I just had a lot of like, I don't know, angst, despair kind of thing. And when I saw the call for HWW, the workshop, I was super excited. I'd never seen anything like it before, and I knew I wanted to apply. And a lot of the people who were giving me advice about how to apply, they were all sort of like, this is a very new thing, and we're all not sure how to go about this. But I knew that there was something there that people hadn't discussed openly yet, and that I wanted to be a part of. I kind of went into the workshop, I'm going to be honest, wondering and hoping whether the workshop, like I would find permission to leave my program or to just sort of, you know, find some kind of attractive avenue outside of academia. I'm still shocked to think this and say this out loud, but there were these activities in the workshop, I remember, where we had to discuss our research with the other fellows. And every time I talked about my research, I would get like really positive responses. And then I would like come home and be like, oh, I want to write, but I got to go back to this workshop tomorrow morning. And so I came out of the workshop sort of recharged to go back and write my dissertation. And yeah, I can't believe that I ever like thought I want to go back and write. But yeah, that was one big surprising sort of impact that the workshop had on me. Actually, I also want to mention, I think Ira was one of the first people I talked to at the workshop, where we just had to talk to each other, and I was like, oh, he's doing something cool too. So it was just a really nice environment to be with all these people doing very cool work. The other thing that I wanted to mention specifically, and I was thinking about this question, what did I learn from the workshop specifically? And I think that one of the like biggest takeaways, sort of very concretely put, was how to do informational interviews and how to think about networking. And at that point in my grad career, I had not really thought about networking. It seemed like a term that wasn't used within academia. Informational interviewing was definitely not something that I knew anything about. But the workshop really shaped my views and attitudes towards both of these terms. The workshop gave us this like sort of assignment several months ahead of the actual 3 weeks that we were there. And they said, start thinking and planning for an informational interview with an organization where you don't know anybody from there. And so that lead time and the excitement that I had for the workshop, it gave me time to prepare sort of early. But I didn't really understand what informational interviewing was. I kind of looked it up and I was like, I don't really want to do that. So I started small. I just reached out to a friend who worked in a nonprofit organization for the arts, McDowell Colony. And she told me about her work, her coworkers, what their academic backgrounds were. She had just been recently job searching, so the terminology and like just sort of the mental space, she was like right on the same page. I then kind of expanded to talk to other friends who I hadn't reached out to in a long time. So I kind of took these like super small baby steps, and I was like, oh, here's a friend who I haven't talked to in a long time, including my calculus instructor from college. I hadn't talked to him in 10 years, and I was just like, I don't even know if he's going to respond to my Facebook message. And it turned out he had finished his degree and then did not want the academy. And so, nothing like a job did not emerge from any of these interactions, but it was just nice to like kind of be with other people who were experiencing something similar. Eventually, I kind of reached out to people I didn't know, including there was one particular job where I have to mention this because it was like a huge thing for me, but I reached out to a friend for information about a particular organization that had a job opening. That friend connected me to somebody else, and then like 3 people later, I was talking to a hiring manager for that position. Now that position didn't work out, but I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I got through 5 people in the span of like a week, all through email. And so I've also reached out to, I remember ACLS Public Fellow alum too. When you look at that list of the alum, you might be surprised to see your friends from high school. And so I reached out to one person that way. I reached out to somebody who I knew somehow through somebody else. And so again, like all of this stuff, just the networking and informational interviewing skills became more and more familiar as time went on. I also should say that a couple things. One is I got my job through what must be called networking. My advisor, my dissertation advisor, was the chair of the department at the time. And he was like, our grad program coordinator is leaving. Are you interested in this position? It didn't turn out until 2 years later, but this job, I would not be in this job without that connection. And then I was also thinking about networking. It's just not something that you do only outside of the academy. For instance, if you need an external dissertation committee member, then you either connect through your advisor or someone that you met at a conference. And as a side note, I met my external dissertation committee member at the last alum panel at HWW. I did not expect that, but I welcomed it. And so yeah, I just found that, you know, my attitudes towards networking, informational interviewing morphed from fear of the unknown to total comfort and just realization that this is a very common thing and it's something that's totally doable. I'm also like very shy and reserved in person. So I feel like if I can do it, anybody can do it. I just want to close with just a couple, just one comment about thinking about the future workshop in light of what's going on right now. I remember in 2015, one of the big themes was serendipity and just being open to the fact that you can't control all the opportunities that come your way, but you can prepare and do your best and, you know, understand what is informational interviewing. You can start networking, you can start researching all these different jobs. And this, you know, this was true before COVID. You couldn't control everything. But I think the workshop really did help me understand what I could and couldn't control a lot better than before. And yeah, and this is something that Maggie said, you know, having more agency in your job search and postdoc life. I think the Humanities Without Walls summer workshop is just perfect for this. So yeah, I just encourage PhD candidates to really consider applying for this workshop. And I'm always happy to help or answer questions. I think the organizers will give our emails, but I'm cold call, whether I know you 5 people away, please reach out to me anytime. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, you guys brought up so many things that reminded me of my own experience in 2017. And I know that there are a number of my fellow alums from the 2017 workshop who have joined us. So shout out to the 2017 cohort. Snaps is something we all do at the workshop. So just had to do that. We have some great questions that our attendees put into the chat. And again, I would encourage you, if you have a question, please keep putting those in there. But I thought I would start with a question from Seth Gaithers. Do you perceive any particular difficulties for a Mellon ACLS public fellow to attain a tenure track faculty job down the road, should they desire to do so? So I think that could be, you know, specifically to Ira or maybe Antoinette, if you have any thoughts about the possibilities of getting a tenure track job after being a public fellow.
I mean, I know the goal of the program is really to sort of demonstrate the viability of humanities PhDs in non-tenure track positions and positions, you know, public-facing positions. And there is part of the application process does sort of try to verify your genuine interest in that career path. You know, that there is a concern, I think, that this is reading between the lines, you know, that people not see it as a sort of like parking spot on the way to a tenure track job. That said, I think people have definitely found after doing, you know, the public fellows program that they do go back into a tenure track position. So, I mean, I think it would be similar to any time you know, any scenario in which you took a job outside of academia for 2 years away from, you know, the tenure track, you would not have probably done the same amount of, you know, research and publishing that you might have done if you were in a academic institution, depending on your metabolism, I guess. But you know, many people do try to continue to write and publish while they're in these positions. So it's probably very dependent on your field. But I would advise that if you're really just thinking of it as a kind of like, you know, side path on the way to the tenure track, that it might not be the right fit for that career. But if it's really something that, you know, it's like you want to explore that path and then see, then yeah, I think, you know, you just have to think about, you know, what the likely demands of your field, you know, the job market in your field are. And I should say I'm happy to, I know there might be a lot of particular interest in the ACLS Mellon thing, and So feel free to, email me or get in touch with me directly if you want to follow up with those questions. I don't want to dominate this with ACLS Mellon stuff too much.
Maggie, I might just say that, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I might just say that I think it's one of the goals of ACLS and Mellon and HWW to transform the institutions, the academic institutions that folks like the consortial partners live in, so that they would actually welcome the ways in which someone who'd been doing something para-academic or non-academic at all, to welcome them into the academy, because the academy needs you more than ever, if that's where you want to be, and that we're trying to push against the closure of the academy to those kinds of experiences. And we want to produce faculty members who can model that in and out, across boundaries kind of trajectory to up and coming PhD students in whatever, humanities and arts related fields they're in. So that's a long-term aspiration that I think all these programs kind of share. But of course, people should do what they want to do.
Can I say something?
Go ahead,
Linda. I think it's, I have to agree with you in that. I think it's, we're in a really complex time right now, right, with COVID and so much of a dependence on online learning and what that means, and hybrid learning and flex learning, all these things that are necessities in the moment. We're sort of in an instance where a lot of our skills as educators and as people are coming into play. And so ALTAC's has a really odd definition in this moment, and fellowships have this really interesting definition in this moment. I mean, like I said, I want to work within the academy. I don't know that it's a tenure track. I mean, if there's a tenure track job, great. But this is the market we're in right now, and it's not great. Having said that, I really think that the skill sets that we're bringing to this, and the fellowships that are coming up now, that whole emerging scholar thing that Mellon, or is it ACLS? Mellon, one of them, is doing right now with the different institutions. I think that, and the bridge to faculty, those kinds of things are really the direction that makes sense for the academy with a 21st century scholar like all of us coming out of the academy now, to address how the academy has to transition to this model. And so I think that as you think about fellowships, and as it applies to HWW, this is a great opportunity to learn about other things and to learn about what else is going on. And so, do this to find out about that, and to find out ways to find out about that. It's not just networking for a tenure track job, it's networking for other opportunities that will lead you to wherever you want to go. And it really helps you to understand where you might want to go. And so, but I really think we have to start thinking about the academy in this different way, because it's not going back to, there's a tenure track job that's going to lead to an associate, that's going to lead to a full, I don't think that exists anymore, really. So, and then what does that mean for all of us? Well, it means, students still have to learn. Students still have to be taught. People still have to get educations and to graduate. So who is going to do that labor, and how is that labor going to exist? How do we envision that? And I think in this moment, we have a little bit of an opportunity with these kinds of fellowships to I don't know, to leverage that to our advantage, because we are coming out with these skill sets to do that. So
I would also say that I think we have some anecdotal evidence now based on the experiences of our 150 now alums, that if you are trained in career diversity, that becomes an asset for you if you go on to becoming a tenure track professor who will in the future be advising future graduate students, that you're conversant in these conversations and can have those conversations with your students about thinking about our careers with a PhD broadly. So we're getting a lot of questions now, so I'm really excited about this. We had another question about the ACLS Public Fellows question. So I think, Ira, real quickly, do Mellon or ACLS Public Fellows typically go on to permanent staff positions in government or nonprofit organizations? Do we know that? I'm not sure if we know that.
I don't know the exact statistics, but I mean, that's the pathway that most people are pursuing. Many people, although it's no guarantee, many people do get hired into the organization or institution where they're placed, where their job is, and many people then transition to another peer institution or organization. So yes, it's a sort of career launch kind of thing. And I also just wanted to echo, Maggie, what you were just saying, and like I think that's a great point of how important it is wherever we all end up to have advisors in the academy who can talk about these other career paths, and of course it's understandable that so far many of us have encountered advisors who were hired into an institution directly out of graduate school, and that's they have a great deal of insight into the academic job market and academic publishing, but may just not have a lot of resources to offer students, even if they're supportive of taking other routes. And yeah, the education of faculty to be able to advise grad students in this way is a key part of the seeds that are being sown, I think, with the work that HWW is doing.
Agreed. I also think too, the comment about transitions once you have like a 2-year postdoc or something like the ACLS Public Fellows position, your first position after you finish your PhD is not the only transition you're going to have to go through, right? We're going to have multiple career transitions. So I think another, if we're talking about the skill sets that come out of the workshop, is to really help you consider all of those transitions that you'll be going through, not just your first, but the ones that you'll experience throughout your professional lives. So we have another great question here. At what point in the PhD would a student benefit most from HWW? Would this experience be more useful at the end or the beginning of a PhD program? And boy, that's a question we ask at HWW all the time. And so I'd be curious to hear what Kay, Ira, and Linda, your thoughts about that. I have some thoughts and I kind of go back and forth, but yeah, I'm curious to hear what you all have to say.
I saw a question in the chat about whether the end of the PhD is a good time. I just remember that there were people who had just finished their first year of the PhD program in our cohort. And then I think there were people who were on the way out, people who were like right at a midpoint where they could leave with an MA or continue with the PhD. My thoughts are just that anybody at any point in their career, it's a good idea. I think a lot of people going into PhD programs are worried about placement, but aren't quite close enough to really see what's involved in or what's going on in that situation, or even know where they're going to be in their lives at that point, in addition to just their work and everything. I think at the end of the PhD program, you're finishing your dissertation. I was working on my dissertations. I think that's a good time too, because you're really faced with this question about placement, job, and the job market and what to do postdoc. So, and I don't think it's too late either. I think you just learn so much, and it's just so helpful. Yeah, maybe the sooner the better, so that you're just sort of thinking about this already and preparing as best you can. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
I just wanted to jump in and yeah, reinforce that I think it's applicable across those years. I remember our year, which was the first year. I think at that point it might have been sort of framed as advanced doctoral students originally. That I think that's changed. Maybe it's changed, but then we ended up with this really broad stretch. And so I remember having the feeling, I'm just being very frank here, that there was this range within the room of people who were approaching it as a space to consider whether they made the right decision, and maybe if they wanted to pull out and go in a different direction. And then those of us who were, that was after my 5th year, right? Those who were sort of committed to finishing, but were thinking about this different career path. And so I think it's applicable across that, but I do think that there are different sets of questions that come into the room for people at different points in their doctoral careers.
oh, sorry, I had to turn on my mic. I have to agree with that. I think if your program has a good professional development, that doing it earlier is probably better. I mean, that I did it after my first year, but I also came into the program knowing exactly what I wanted to do and the research I wanted to do. But the thing that happened to me during the summer was Justin Zulo and a conversation during lunch about performance studies. And I was telling him about my work, and he said, "Have you looked at the work of Diana Taylor?" And that just really changed my life in it's that very simple conversation, because I hadn't seriously considered performance studies for my work prior to that. And then we had a couple more conversations before the end of the term of us being together. And so in that way, it really did enhance my dissertation, that conversation, and that was an unexpected benefit. Yeah, yay, performance studies, yes. But yeah, I did it at a time when it was before I was really getting into comps but I already knew what I was going to do in terms of research. That wasn't so much of an issue for me. But it was, the other thing I want to say about this is the conversations that people were having with us about leaving the academy were so profound that I had a real respect for the challenge of making that kind of a decision. And that was something I had never experienced before. I mean, everybody I knew that went, finished, I mean, it was a challenge, but they got it done, or left because of some other unrelated reason, right? Or didn't finish for some other reason. Not because it was just that there was some sort of, complete challenge to the scholarship or something about the discipline that was making it an issue to want to finish. And so that was very eye-opening for me, that experience of HWW, and the fact that we had a space where people could make those kinds of choices and finally decide to not finish, because it isn't a choice we make, just like, okay, I'm not going to do this. It's profound. So there's my take on that.
And Linda, I think there are a number of fellows who I know from my cohort, I won't name names in case, since they're not here, but who decided post-workshop to leave their PhD program. Because I think what's important for everyone who's attending to know is that at HWW, we really are outcome agnostic. What you do post-PhD, or if you decide to leave your program, we just want you to be happy and to find, work that you find meaningful and energizing and, really consistent with your ethics. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that. Okay, next question. Do we have any tips for applying for the HWW workshop? Like best strategies, what might you want to emphasize in the personal statement? And I know we'll get to talking about the actual call for applications a little bit towards the end in the next 10-15 minutes, but if you can remember when you applied, yeah, Kay.
One thing I remember, well, I'll say two things. One is when I applied, I was encouraged to talk about my research. Don't forget about the research. Don't just say like I'm not, or don't act like it's not important or siphon it off or something, but incorporate that into everything that you're saying about yourself in your CV and your personal statement. The other thing is after this workshop, after our 2015 workshop, I got lots of emails from people who were applying for the subsequent workshops, and they were asking me, do you mind sharing your application materials? And so I felt, there was one person who asked me 2 years in a row, and she wasn't accepted the first time, but then she was accepted the following year. And so that sort of getting familiar with what successful applications look like, I thought that was a good strategy. We didn't have that in 2015, but everybody has it going forward from then.
It was a long time ago, but I will say that I know that, thinking of this chain, of professionalization experiences that started, sort of with the HWW workshop, I know that I kept whatever my statement was, like I kept, that became the seed that I kept revising and it like was still, some of that stuff was still in my cover letter like 4 or 5 years later. I mean, heavily like reworked, but I know that that was the first draft that I like was, you know, relying on all the way through.
That's so funny. I agree with both of you. It was yes. A lot of people have asked me to share it. I've shared it with like folks at my U who are interested in applying. And the other was, yes, that's always been the nugget. That was where, yeah, my teaching statement, any of that stuff where I have to talk about me, it comes out of that first statement. That was a total cut and paste and revised. So I worked really hard on that. And I want to say it was the first fellowship I had ever won that I'd gotten. And so the nice thing was that my advisor who was actually working on a Fulbright at the time, or working her Fulbright scholarship or her fellowship application, helped me a lot with it to make sure that I was emphasizing things in a certain order, focusing on my research, and not to discount it or minimize it in any way. So yeah, yeah.
And I guess reflecting on that a little bit more, I think probably the reason for that is that it's one of the first times that I really was asked sort of to talk about, yeah, myself as, you know, more holistically, right? Like other like research applications that I'd done before had been so much focused on like, okay, I want to go to this archive and here's why it's necessary for my dissertation, you know, but, you know, nobody asked about my motivations or my, you know, kind of the underlying trajectory that it was going to, you know, enable in my life and the life of my research maybe. So I think that that's, you know, I mean, putting those two things together, right? Like not forgetting about your research, but also putting, you know, this is a chance to talk about yourself and your path, your career trajectory, you know, and not minimizing that.
I should point out that Jason, our Director of Operations, has put the questions that we'll want you to address in this year's call for applications. So my best tip for anyone who's thinking about applying is to really spend some considerable time thinking through those questions. And, you know, really being sincere and answering them to the best of your ability and being honest. I think that's one of the things that we try to prioritize the most at HWW in the workshop is being honest, because it helps us figure out our values and the things that we find meaningful, which is so important to all of this work. I think next, so we have a couple of questions, again, in relation to the call for applications, but we have two other questions that I thought bring us back to some of the strategies and skill sets that are learned during the workshop. So I have a question from Amrita Badapadhem. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce your last name correctly, but it's from Amrita. And she's wondering, for PhD candidates, what are some of the ways to build an online presence to connect or network with an audience beyond academia? What online platforms could one use? You guys, you know, I think I might suggest, I think Twitter is something that is a great place to network, so long as you're really careful about how you curate your social media presence. And that is something that we really explore in depth in the workshop, as well as thinking about what's the brand and how do you want to present yourself on different social media platforms, whether it be LinkedIn or Twitter or even, you know, Facebook. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that from your experiences.
I mean, I don't think I'm a great expert at this, but I mean, LinkedIn obviously is, you know, a place that people find you, right? So I'd say at least have a profile, even if that's not like your, you know, main thing, because people do search there for you if they want to find you in a professional context. You know, I think it depends on your field, but I mean, right now it's down because the platform I was on went out of business, but I have a website, right, that encompasses both my creative practice and scholarly practice and other things. So I think that was a useful thing. I find people often look at it when they're about to you know, meet with me or something like that, and suddenly people know something about my work. And then the other thing is just like, you know, being in non-academic context. So like if you can write an article for a, you know, a magazine or a, you know, whatever your field is, website, you know, that has a general readership. If you can, you know, speak to audiences, school groups, whatever about your field or your research topics, you know, anything that sort of like puts you into non-academic contexts, you know, but showcasing your expertise in some way and your adaptability to those contexts, I think is really good.
I would, to piggyback off of that, I would say anything that makes you professionally searchable. So, you know, if you're coming up, if someone Googles you and sees that you've, you know, done films and are working on projects and other things, and that's the first you know, the first 10 entries are about the things you're doing, as opposed to, you know, you have a profile on Facebook or whatever, is going to benefit you. The other benefit in that is if people want to teach about your work and you haven't, and your book's not out yet or your articles aren't out yet, they can take from what's already available online. And I'm, you know, because I'm a filmmaker, that works really well for me. I want to say that if you're going to do an online presence, try to associate it with organizations that you are associated with. So yeah, if you're going to get on Twitter and your professional organization has a Twitter handle, or those, or any sort of the sub-organizations within the larger body has a Twitter handle, yeah, follow it and comment and get yourself on those, into those spaces, and so to help to define your professional self. Yeah, and having a presence, and I'm very bad at, because my site's not up yet, my professional site's not up yet. That's one of those, yes, I'm working on it along with 50 other things, right? That I, you know, if you haven't already bought your name, buy your domain name. You know, it's a thing that we don't think about, but we should think about, right? Because it is a way, again, it is about branding and who are you, what is the professional self you want to present to the world at 24 hours a day. I mean, that, you know, and we have that opportunity now, so yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think Twitter can be really helpful. If, yeah, again, if, like Maggie said, if you curate and really control what you see. I just wanted to say, I follow Maggie on Twitter and a lot of other people who talk about career diversity on Twitter, and I feel like there's a kind of candid discussion about this stuff that still comes off as professional, and it's really informative. So I kind of can still understand like what's going on with career diversity through that. And then the other thing I just wanted to add was LinkedIn is helpful. It's kind of like, you know, if you wanted to share like a really quick summary of your resume with somebody, with, you know, people, just have that available. So it's really convenient to just have set up. So those were the two that I wanted to recommend.
Great, you know, so we've got a few more questions. I know that they're in the chat and we have them in the Google Docs too. So we're gonna try to shift now to really talking about the call for applications, which I hope will address some of the vast majority of the other questions that have been asked. And so Antoinette, if you wanna talk a little bit about the CFA.
Yes, thank you. So as Jason has indicated in the chat, the call for applications will be released on August 31st and will be available on our website, which is Humanities Without Walls, all run together, .illinois.edu. And as a registrant for this event, you'll also get a copy via email when we release the call for applications. The most important thing for you to know at this stage is that as a student, you cannot apply directly to the HWW Career Diversity Workshop. You must be nominated by your institution, by your Humanities Center Director if you have one, or by your graduate dean or college dean. So this means that if you want to apply, you'll have to be in contact with that person ahead of time, sharing the call and the details with them so that they understand the process and the deadlines. You want to be aware that some institutions, especially those who over the the past 5 years are familiar with HWW might choose to run what we call an internal limited submission application process. That is to say, your institution might issue a local call, review proposals internally, and forward their best candidate to HWW. If you have questions about this process or how to alert your administrative leaders to the call, please contact us and we can help you with that. Important to know that there's just one nomination per campus. So the call for applications that you'll see coming out on the 31st recommends an internal deadline, internal to your institution, of October 31st, with nominations due to HWW by December 1st. We suggest that internal deadline to make sure that however your institution is running that internal competition, they have enough time to review the applications, or if you're the only one and it's a, you know, your administrative contact person is a busy dean or whatever, it won't get lost in the shuffle, and there'll be enough time between that internal deadline and the deadline for their submission to HWW on December 1st. So if you have any questions, once you see the call for applications, please contact Jason, who's put his email in the chat. And that's a good way to begin to end our session today by thanking Jason for all that he does for HWW. He's the director of operations, the jack of all trades. Yeah, anybody who's been, there he is, anybody who's been connected to HWW knows that Jason is an integral part of everything we do, and he's been around this rodeo. He wrote the FAQs, he knows the ins and outs. He's really, all kidding aside, an invaluable resource for you. So, any questions about that? And yes, we are certain that the 2021 workshop will be virtual. We had to make that very tough decision now because, as you might imagine, the process and the costs of getting hotels and organizing all that, it's just too risky. It was slated to be in Chicago in 2021, and we're just not feeling, let's say, sanguine about summer 2021 in Chicago. So we are thinking creatively and talking to all kinds of people about how we can make this a really great experience. Probably nothing can replace the embodied community experience of the workshop, but we are going to do our very best to innovate and to think creatively about how we can recreate as much of the sense of community and all the various opportunities for students as we can. Maggie, did you want to say anything else?
I think one, if you, I put my Twitter handle in the chat in case anybody wants to come in and follow me on Twitter. And I also put Kay's Twitter handle. Linda, I didn't share yours, but I can share it if you feel comfortable with that. I see you're nodding, so I'll get that into the chat in a second. Come and follow us if you're interested in learning more about the career diversity conversation. I think there's, as Kay mentioned, there is a really professional, respectful conversation that's happening. And it's a great way to, I think, connect with other PhDs and to begin networking and to understand networking. I think one of there's so many beautiful things about the HWW workshop, from the community building to I see Linda smiling because we had this conversation when we prepped for this call about a week ago, and it's like a homecoming. It's the people who are members of your cohort are like family and very dear friends, and it's one of the things that I think is so wonderful about what it is we do at HWW. So I think the big question for us right now with a virtual workshop is, how do we continue to build that sense of community in an online space? And I think that is a question that academics are thinking through as we all are kind of thinking about asynchronous or synchronous learning models in digital and online presences. So that's something, I agree with Antoinette. Will it shift that because we're not in Chicago in an embodied experience? Probably, but I think that the methods and the values and the conversations we hold, we can still maintain that in the virtual space. So I don't know if Kay, Ira, or Linda have any other closing thoughts, or Jason, if you have anything that you want to share before we sign off today? Oh, Jason, you are muted.
I want to respond to a question we got about where you can find a point of contact at people's home institution. So if you are a student at one of the 16 institutions that comprises Humanities Without Walls, you can find the point of contact either on the People webpage or the Contact webpage in the Humanities Without Walls website. However, if you are not at a consortial school, you can drop me an email and we can work together to find out who that person will be.
And Antoinette, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I want to thank our panelists very much for taking their time in the busy day, offering us such wonderful memories of earlier cohorts and reminding us here at HWW about the importance of this work. It's just so gratifying to see you thriving and flourishing and making change in the world. So thank you for that. I guess I want to end by talking about one of the paradoxes of career diversity at this particular moment, which is, and some of the panelists have alluded to this, and I struggle with it too, so I don't think it's resolved. What should be the relationship of your scholarly work to the variety of interests that you have as a person, and to your desire to move either beyond the academy or to continue to cross that boundary between the academy and the world? I think that's a highly idiosyncratic question. It depends on you, but it's something that we're interested in helping you work through. So if you're doing a PhD in African American history or Peruvian life worlds in the 14th century, or any number of amazing humanities and arts-based projects, we want to help you think about how the values and the commitments that brought you to that PhD work can be realized in whatever it is that you do. It's not easy to do that, but we need humanistic knowledge in all aspects of the world. That was a truism in 2015, and it's a painful truism now. And so if you think about Humanities Without Walls as a kind of launching pad, that's one of the kind of affective, ethical, and ongoingly personal kinds of conversations that we want to struggle with you. We want to struggle with you on. And so we welcome that kind of struggle. We don't have all the answers. It's a deeply dynamic world we're living in, COVID and everything else alongside it. And so we are in this fight and struggle with you. We have some thoughts and ideas and practices and methodologies, but all of those assets that we have are the result of 5 years of students, of 150 students coming through and showing us what we should make matter. So we look forward to meeting you and hope to keep in touch with you. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to be in touch with us.